Our first reader is a lifelong resident of Chicago. She studied art at the University of Chicago and interior design at the Harrington College of Design and has a master's in painting from Governor State. Her work has been exhibited in several Chicago area venues, including solo exhibitions at the Harold Washington Library and the University of Illinois at Chicago, as well as in group shows at the Children's Museum and the Chicago Center for Green Technology. When she's not painting, she works as a freelance interior designer. She does have a show coming up, and there's a flyer. There should be a flyer on your table. Feel free to take that home with you to remind you. And she also has some books for sale tonight. Please welcome Tiffany Gholar.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be reading from one of my art books. It's called The Doll Project. It's about a body of work of the same name that's a digital photography project where I was using Barbies to explore the negative messages the media gives women about what we should look like. I have always been a Barbie girl. My fondest memories of my childhood in the 80s involve playing with my magnificent 3-story Barbie townhouse with the yellow elevator. Between the ages of 4 and 10 years old, whenever anyone asked me what I wanted for my birthday or Christmas or Easter, the answer was always the same. I wanted another Barbie. My numerous dolls, some contemporary, others the former beloved 60s or 70s era playthings of older cousins, became the cast of characters in my elaborate miniature dramas. They were whoever I wanted them to be, not just trapped in the roles predetermined by little stories on the back of the pink boxes they came in. I pretended that my Barbies were doctors, detectives, artists, rock stars, reporters, athletes, actresses, jewel thieves, teachers, social workers, and lawyers. They fell in love, got married, adopted smaller dolls like Strawberry Shortcake and the girls from Rose Petal Place, or teamed up with my little brother's larger action figures to fight crime. My desk became a Barbie hospital, where a team of Barbie surgeons worked hard to reattach the heads and limbs of dolls that my cruel or careless playmates had broken, and to cure the disease that afflicted the hollow-bodied generic Barbie dolls, removing the loose pieces of plastic that rattled around inside of them. My middle dresser drawers were Barbie apartments, and the rest of my bedroom was an imaginary Barbie town. Playing with my dolls was about so much more than fashion and putting together cute outfits. It was a window into adulthood, allowing me to envision what it would be like to have a career in a home of my own. I was never interested in playing with baby dolls because the stories I could tell with them were so limited, but the adventures I could imagine for my Barbie dolls seemed endless. But as I got older, I felt betrayed by Barbie. Growing up wasn't nearly as glamorous or as fun as she and Skipper made it seem. They didn't have to worry about maxi pads or tampons, which came in hot pink packaging that reminded me of the dolls I used to love. I didn't realize that the big, beautiful Barbie bust line I coveted and hoped to have someday was more than just something to fill out an elegant strapless gown, but could also be fraught with pain and malignancies and could attract lewd comments from boys and inappropriate attention from dirty old men. Their unblemished plastic faces would never get pimples. And Barbie and Skipper's painted-on smiles did not belong on the faces of women who endured cramps and hormonal mood swings. Barbie's beauty had always been a blessing and not a curse, her hyper-feminine physique an asset and not a liability. Barbie made puberty and womanhood seem so effortless. But after she betrayed me, I developed an aversion to all things pink. The last toys I played with were Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures. Years later, as a young adult, I revisited my Barbie collection. I also began going to toy stores again, finding myself wandering through the pink fashion doll aisle I had once so despised. I began to buy new clothes for the old dolls I decided to display in my new apartment. Then, when I got engaged, I bought a few more dolls to dress in wedding gowns and tuxedos, planning to display them at my wedding or reception. As a young woman dealing with my own issues of body image, I began to look differently at Barbie dolls. I began to wonder whether my reemerging interest in fashion dolls was a good or bad thing. And the more I confronted my own disordered patterns of eating and exercise, I began to realize that the extent to which societal pressure to conform to such stringent standards was the real issue I was facing. I began a radically unconventional process to overcome my issues, educating myself as much as I could with thought-provoking books and articles, and finding an eclectic group of supporters online. But as I recovered, I was saddened to discover that there was another community online, one that would rather celebrate and encourage eating disorders than fight them. A few years later, while in graduate school for painting, I took an art history class about Native American artwork. Learning about the Kachina dolls of the Hopi tribe and how they embody the highest ideals of their society made me wonder what modern-day mainstream American Kachinas would look like. During this time, I was also working for a nonprofit that provides mentoring for teenage girls. As I was proofreading the curriculum, a unit on media literacy caught my attention. This collision of ideas led to the doll project. I first became familiar with doll photography as a genre through the work of Gina Gershon and her charming book of pictures of a saucer-eyed, large-headed 1970s fashion doll called Blythe. I also looked at the work of Laurie Simmons. I had on display in my apartment a miniature print of one of her photos, which adorned the Kaleidoscope House dollhouse that she had helped design. And I had already begun to follow Flickr groups in which fellow fashion doll collectors were posting their photos. All of these informed the aesthetic of the doll project. As I studied technical aspects of the photos and considered the approach I would take, I felt somewhat nervous about embarking upon this project because I had gotten such bad grades in the one photography class I took in college. Fortunately, I found digital photography much more forgiving than 35mm film. During my first year as an undergraduate at the University of Chicago, I took a humanities course in which we had the option of creating collages instead of writing midterm and final papers about the texts we read. My collages gave me an outlet for my creativity, which I desperately needed since I was not yet enrolled in any art courses. They also helped me to hone my skills creating a visual language and symbolic photography and symbolic vocabulary for complex concepts and ideas. Even then, the pieces that resonated with me most were those that were concerned with the way that women are portrayed. During my undergraduate film classes, I had heard about Todd Haynes' Superstar, The Karen Carpenter Story, a docudrama using customized Barbie dolls to reenact parts of Karen Carpenter's life and death from anorexia, which I eventually watched while working on this project. When choosing the dolls that I would use for these photographs, I wanted to be sure to include dolls that represented women and girls of various ages and different racial backgrounds. I also wanted to use dolls and accessories that were mass-produced rather than making my own. The only exceptions are the Please Don't Feed the Models and I Am Beautiful t-shirts. This is one of the dolls wearing a Please Don't Feed the Models from Etsy. Like I was saying, which were handmade by 2 doll clothing artisans who sell their work on Etsy. In using commercially made toys for this project, I intend to evoke a sense of familiarity and nostalgia in viewers, inviting them to take a closer look. The doll project invites viewers to take a closer look at the world around them as well. My intention is not to tell anyone what to think, but to encourage people to think for themselves, question the images they may have taken for granted in fashion and beauty ads, and create their own more inclusive standards of beauty. And then the last little essay I want to read is called My First Diet. In the 1980s and 90s, Mattel produced the My First Barbie dolls, which were made with little girls in mind. Putting the dolls' clothing on didn't require advanced motor skills, and they wore simple, girlish accessories like pink hair ribbons. As My First Barbie was my second Barbie doll when I was 4 years old. She had long blonde hair and bangs and wore a pink and white gingham skirt. As I began taking pictures for the doll project, I thought of these dolls, and the phrase, My First Diet, came to mind. What kinds of accessories would come with a My First Diet doll? What would she look like? How old would she be? After reading some heart-wrenching articles about girls as young as 4 wanting to lose weight, I decided that my first diet doll of this generation would be quite young, frightfully so. Later, I decided to use dolls of different eras, with dieting Barbies in the late 1960s and dieting teenage fashion dolls, Skipper and Jazzy specifically, in the late 1980s. Although I know that eating disorders are not diets, so many are precipitated by efforts to, quote, eat healthy or lose a few pounds to fit into a bathing suit. And then it becomes impossible to stop. Preparing, consuming, purging, and restricting food becomes symbolic of other inner forces at work. And while genetics and biology play a part, I wanted to examine a role that a culture of dieting plays in the lives of so many women. Maybe diet-obsessed women will never reach the point of needing to be hospitalized, but the mere idea that one's weight and measurements determines one's self-worth is a seriously problematic one. Unfortunately, it has become such a part of our everyday lives that we do not question it. Why is no one asking why? As women become more visible in the world, must we also take up less space?